WFLA Now will begin momentarily. WFLA Now will begin momentarily. Streaming live on WFLA Now, powered by 1-800-ASK-GARY. Here's J.B. Biunno.
Prosecutors say we potentially have 2 victims during a hearing in the gruesome murder and dismemberment of Stephanie Crone-Overholts in Tampa Bay. Hear what the prosecutors said about the discovery of a second DNA profile of an unknown woman found at the crime scene, plus the latest on the case here on WFLA Now. Hey there, everybody. J.B. Biunno here with you alongside 8 on your sides, Justin Schecker. Yet again, a lot to break down here, but we're about to play the sound for you. We're going to let a few more people file in here on Facebook Live. We're live on WFLA.com, the WFLA app, YouTube Live, and Facebook Live. We're going to let a few more people file into Facebook Live here before we play back this moment in court from Wednesday, a very key moment where the prosecutors mentioned that a DNA profile of a second female, unknown identity, was found at the same murder scene of Stephanie Crone-Overholts, of course, that we have been reporting on over the last several days. And Justin, you were there in court. This is a pretty big revelation that we have from the Tampa courtroom yesterday.
And this came toward the end of the 2-hour pre-trial detention here. We had the breaking news yesterday. The judge granted the state's motion to keep Robert Kessler locked up without bond until trial. And we're about to play for the clip as a few more of you join us in this audience. And this was towards the end of the hearing when Assistant State Attorney Scott Harmon was making the case as to why Robert Kessler should be kept behind bars. And he dropped this stunning revelation at the end, JB. A lot of what was said during court, we knew from the arrest warrant, we knew from the state's motion. But this moment at the end was a bit of a surprise for all of us who were sitting there in the courtroom.
So first, you're going to hear from the state prosecutor, and that state prosecutor, I have my name here in the notes, and then of course you're going to hear from the public defender here in response as well, plus the judge and her reasoning as to why that it's not included necessarily in yesterday's hearing. But here again, let's play back this now. This is the sound from yesterday inside the court hearing on the discovery of a second DNA profile of a second unknown woman found at the crime scene of the murder of Stephanie Crone-Overholts.
But I would suggest to the court that alone indicates a disregard for the safety of the community. Also, the fact that we have an unknown DNA profile in the same area where her body was dismembered. Now, we don't know for a fact whose DNA that is, but we know it's a female's and it's not his, the defendant's, and it's contained within an area of blood, and it's not the victim. I think, and I would suggest to the court, that alone shows a disregard for the safety of the community, that now we potentially have 2 victims.
And this argument about potentially another victim because there's an unknown female profile, that's just, Your Honor, that should not be given any weight.
I'm not going to consider that at all.
Thank you, Judge. I won't go any further into that then.
So you heard there the judge say that they are not going to be considering that at all. At least this was a hearing on whether or not there was going to be bond for Robert Kessler. Robert Kessler, who has been arrested in the murder of Stephanie Crone-Overholts. That was the hearing that, of course, that we were talking about yesterday here on WFLA Now. But you heard there potentially have 2 victims, Justin, based on a second DNA profile that was found within the blood discovered at the scene there in Lutz, at the home in Lutz.
And this is in that bedroom area, which it's been reported that is where Stephanie Crone-Overholts had been staying which is also, JB, the room where the little girl who'd been living with Mr. Kessler and that they were staying in that bedroom there together is where they found some blood evidence, Stephanie's DNA around the bed in the carpet area.
There's a lot to get to here still. You can use hashtag HeyJustin, hashtag HeyJB, and we'll feature some of. You might be a little bit confused. There's a lot to break down here with the ongoing story of the murder of Stephanie Crone-Overholts, and now potentially maybe there being a second victim based on the blood or the DNA profile that was found amidst the blood there at the home in Lutz, the home of Robert Kessler, according to investigators. So we see that a lot of comments. Hello there to YouTube. Hello to Facebook. We're going to feature some of your comments and your questions if you use hashtag HeyJB, hashtag HeyJustin. But want to let you know that we have a lot more on this on WFLA.com. In particular, I want to note here some of the court documents that we have combed through on this case. Now, digital content producer Heather Monahan passed me this note as far as the court documents, and we were reviewing these court documents, and detectives sent 3 pieces of evidence to the FDLE to be processed. Now, those 3 pieces of evidence, I'm going to read it here from the notes. Blood that was found on a pair of Kessler shoes.
Pair of brown shoes, yep.
Blood that was found on the mattress in the room where Crone-Overholts had been staying at the home there in Lutz, Florida. And blood that was found on a cabinet in Kessler's kitchen. So blood on a cabinet, blood on the mattress, and blood on Kessler's shoes. We don't know where exactly the second DNA profile, the second profile of a female woman who we don't know the identity of this woman, but more on that here in just a second. We don't know the identity of that second woman, but we don't know also too whether or not it was found in the blood in the mattress, on the shoes, on the boots, or on that cabinet in Kessler's kitchen.
Yeah, a lot more questions coming out of this, JB. I was surprised that the prosecutor mentioned this. You obviously heard the public defender objected immediately, and the judge said she was not going to consider this statement as part of her decision to keep Robert Kessler behind bars. Again, JB, most of the hearing yesterday was the lead Tampa Police homicide detective who signed off on the affidavit to arrest Kessler. He kind of went through all the preponderance of evidence that they've come up with in this case, from the witnesses who say they saw a man matching his description, dumping the bins and bags, to that DNA evidence. Now, one thing that the public defender brought up was saying that the state should have called more witnesses and was asking why they didn't bring the FDLE analyst who did the DNA matching to come testify yesterday. But again, it was just the one TPD detective who took the stand there for about an hour and a half for those closing statements where you heard the prosecutor drop that revelation of a possible second victim.
So here's what I want to first and foremost, I want to clarify something. So I mentioned that the DNA was found in the area where Stephanie Crone-Overholts was murdered. The prosecutors actually said, I want to make sure that I clarify this point and correct this point, that the DNA profile was found in the same area where her body is believed to have been dismembered. So I want to make sure that we have that right. Now, we don't know whether or not the murder and the dismemberment took place in the same place. Really gruesome details here. We're talking about a woman who was murdered, and then, of course, subsequent body parts that were then discovered in Tampa's McKay Bay, and again, a person matching Robert Kessler's description using bags and bins to dump the items within those bags and bins in Tampa's McKay Bay, as seen by witnesses. Let's
Can just jump in one more thing on the murder, because I think it is important in this case. We know it is a dismemberment case, JB, but the medical examiner ruled this a homicide. And we know initially they found the leg with the tattoo with the 3 names of her sons. But it seems to me, JB, the fact that they located her upper torso, which had these stab wounds, seems to be another key piece of evidence recovered, which has led the medical examiners to say it's a homicide. And we heard the prosecutor also say in court it's believed she was stabbed to death in some type of struggle and had defensive wounds. So, again, the fact that this body was dismembered, the fact that they located the leg with the tattoo helped lead to her identification, but also that upper torso was what the medical examiner observed the stab wound. So just there's a few more things that came out in court about how this fast-moving investigation is being pieced back together.
And of course, our audience will remember, folks who've been watching WFLA now remember that night that we were live from the Discovery. Eagle 8 HD was flying over the Discovery. We had dive teams in the water after a leg was found. That's what
set this all off.
Kind of the first coverage of from WFLA on this particular story. So let's get to some of the questions and comments. You can use hashtag HeyJB, hashtag HeyJustin here interactively, and we can feature your comments on WFLA now. But this is the big one. This is the one that we get most of all on this story because, of course, Robert Kessler had a 8-year-old girl with him. And Julie Mitchell from YouTube, hello to Julie on YouTube and our YouTube audience, #AJB, where is the little girl? And of course, talking about that 8-year-old girl. So let's first and foremost talk about who the 8-year-old girl is, because we don't have anything concrete that says that this is Robert Kessler's daughter, but this is a little girl, an 8-year-old girl that Robert Kessler is believed to have been caring for at the home in Lutz, correct, Justin?
We know that, and we also know she's now a key witness. The little girl is witness for in the court documents that when Tampa police spoke to her, her story didn't match up with Robert Kessler's as to when they had last seen Stephanie Crone-Overholts. So she's now also a key witness. Her statements were mentioned by the detective. She was obviously not there in court yesterday. Now, we do know from reporting this week from our colleague Jeff Patterson that the little girl's the little girl's grandmother and sister are trying to obtain custody. So the girl's aunt and grandmother are now trying to seek custody. And as Jeff reported the other day, she is in DCF care at this point, JB. So she's been removed from the home, is in DCF care, and she has relatives from her mother's side who are fighting for her custody. So I hope that answers your question, Julie, as to where she is now in DCF custody. But her aunt and grandmother are trying to, on the maternal side, are trying to get custody of this little girl.
So let's show you some of the what we have here in this story. Let's pause it right there if we can. We're going to go back and play this. Okay, this is Stephanie Crone-Overholts, the victim in the murder and the dismemberment from Erie, Pennsylvania, who had met Robert Kessler while down here in the Tampa Bay area and had lived at the home with Robert Kessler in Lutz before her murder and just the gruesome dismemberment that we've been talking about here at length on WFLA now. I want to show you a couple of other pictures here now in relation to this story. Next up, we're going to have the most recent mugshot for Robert Kessler. Now, I say the most recent
He's got a lot of them.
mugshot because there's tons of them. I mean, we're talking about a 6-year prison stint in 1994 up until 2000, and then a 7-year prison stint, as we understand it. He was locked up for another 7 years in 2000. Correct, Justin?
Yep, that was what the prosecutor mentioned about his lengthy criminal history, adding to the reasons why he should remain in jail without bond in this case.
Yeah, so, and Elizabeth Rose James's comment, we're going to get to your comment here in just a second. We've got a few more coming in the Facebook Live comment section using #AJB, #AJustin. But now I want to show you the 8-year-old girl's, and again, we have this, make sure we have this correct. This is the 8-year-old girl's mother next. Correct, Justin?
Yep, April Thompson.
Okay, so this is April Thompson in relation to, there's Robert Kessler, but we also have, I want to bring it up here, this is Stephanie Crone-Overholts, who, again, was murdered and dismembered here in the Tampa Bay area. And then one more time, here now is April Thompson. Now, this is the
little girl's mother.
Yeah, and I bring them up side by side here because there's clearly a resemblance. There's clearly the two look roughly the same. I want to be very, very clear as to who we're talking about. On your screen now is April Thompson, who, as we understand it, neighbors told you how she died and died of an accidental overdose. Right?
When I went out there the Saturday when they identified Stephanie as the victim, Mr. Kessler was not home. We did find his address in Lutz, and there were neighbors who had said police had been there, they did a search warrant, and then there was reference to this little girl, and I was trying to figure out who this little girl was, and all they had said to me was, oh, she stays there with him, and her mother had recently died of an overdose. And that has also been reported by the Tampa Bay Times in their reporting on this case as well, JB. So, again, that reporting corroborates what the neighbors had told me, that this woman had died, I believe, back in September. I don't have the exact date, but in recent months, that this woman had sadly passed away from an overdose, and she is the little girl's mother.
Very unfortunate. There's a theme of drug use throughout this story. Sarah Gray, who is April Thompson, the woman that you're seeing on your screen, April Thompson, her sister, Sarah Gray, who has spoken out.
She spoke with Jeff.
Spoke with 8 on Your Side's Jeff Patterson, saying that that the little girl's mother, April Thompson, they were living with Kessler, but says that the sister died in early September, which we believe to be, of course, by accidental overdose. She said that Kessler is a man with a violent temper. The exact quote, he has a history of battery in April, and given how he could be easily irate and act out and threaten others, I would definitely label him as a vicious person. So that is, again, from April Thompson, April Thompson's sister, Sarah Gray, speaking to 8 on Your Side's Jeff Patterson about Robert Kessler. There's a lot of characters here at play. We're trying to make this as easy for everyone understand. But I want to bring in this comment from Crystal Kane, hashtag HeyJB, hashtag HeyJustin. They will hopefully be able to use genetic genealogy to identify the second victim. And this is why, of course, we bring up April Thompson here on screen. We do not know the identity of the second person. Again, blood within the blood at the scene of the dismemberment was a DNA profile belonging to a second female, Justin. We do not know who that second female is. Crystal, right on the money, saying we can only hope that DNA testing can provide some clues as to who that second victim is.
Actually, this is also could be relevant to this, JB, and I give credit to our assignment editor, Rick Russo, sent me this as well. We have court paperwork that on July 12th, 2021, April Ann Thompson filed a petition for injunction protection against domestic violence against who? Robert Lee Kessler. So we have court paperwork that before this woman passed away, she had filed a protective order against Mr. Kessler. Just adding to this mystery in the cloud over what happened here and everything that led to this murder investigation with Miss Overholts.
And this is going to be okay. This next comment comes in from D. Bagwell, and before I bring up this comment, I want to preface that there's a lot of unknown here, and we know that this is a difficult. When we're talking about an 8-year-old girl, it's difficult to kind of think about what might have happened within the home in Lutz. And we don't know what happened within the home in Lutz. But D. Bagwell saying hashtag HJB, that wondering if the blood could be the little girl's. Who knows what he has been doing to her? Someone needs to talk to her about him. Has a psychologist talk to the 8-year-old girl?
So the one thing, when I remember from our stream last week that Jeff Patterson, who observed the little girl, said she appeared to be in good health. I do want to mention that, right? You remember Jeff talked about that she was the little girl who noted that he came to interview Mr. Kessler before the arrest. So at least according to what our colleague Jeff observed, the little girl appeared to be in good health. I think that's important to share with our viewers, JB.
And it's important to note that just because blood belonging to or a DNA profile was found in blood at the scene of the dismemberment doesn't mean that the second DNA profile belongs to someone who is deceased. If it was a spatter of blood that was found, and that spatter of blood contains the DNA profile of somebody who, whatever story you're covering, whatever forensic person or forensic investigator is working that scene, it doesn't necessarily mean, if you find blood, it doesn't necessarily mean that the blood belongs to somebody who is deceased. So we don't know whether or not there is a second victim. Now, the prosecutor said we potentially have a second victim because the DNA was found at the same scene of the dismemberment. But we just don't, based on the information given to us by prosecutors, we don't have enough information to say that we have a second. But you know, there's a lot to break down here. I mean, we're talking about a mattress that was that contained enough blood for them to, of course, send it to the FDLE for testing. We have combed through the court documents, and there was multiple layers of carpet. Okay, multiple layers of carpet in the room. When they ripped up one layer of carpet, they found one or two more or multiple underneath. That's not incriminating evidence, but when it all comes together as far as the scene of this dismemberment, it certainly is one that where you can almost envision it in your head, Justin. It's gruesome. It's terrible to think about.
I have to make a major correction to what I just said. I read this incorrectly. It was Kessler petitioning against April.
Okay. No, that's a good.
I apologize. I'm going to correct myself from earlier. Robert Lee Kessler, being sworn certified the statements that he is the petitioner seeking the protective order against her. I apologize for that. I opened the email quickly, JB. I just wanted to please clarify that that it was Mr. Kessler seeking. He was the petitioner, and April Thompson was the respondent. So apologize to viewers. Wanted to correct myself on that. Was opening the court document. But again, this is a document filed July 12th before Ms. Thompson passed away.
And this is interactively what we do on WFLA Now. It's so many times will we be live on stream, and folks who have joined us in our Gabby Petito, Brian Laundrie coverage will remember very vividly that a lot of times information still comes in. We live now in a world where information is coming in at all moments of the day. How many emails would you say, Justin, that we get on an hourly basis?
Hourly basis?
It's a lot. It's
50 to 60 an hour at least.
Staggering amount of information to process, and a lot of it is all happening in real time. There could be developments and have been developments while we've been live on stream. So it's very important that we also issue those corrections, and I've done so too.
I was trying to glean through this, and again, once I'd opened the document, I'd noticed the petitioner versus the respondent. So just wanted to clarify that. Just another document in this mystery web of.
But you know what though?
Yeah.
You know what though? And this goes back to, and I mentioned Gabby Petito, I mentioned Brian Laundrie, and a lot of folks who watch our streams remember a lot of the streams that we did during that coverage and how prevalent domestic disputes and domestic violence was in those streams after what happened in Moab, what happened in Utah. And that was a case where they were, where it wasn't necessarily, it's never clear cut. It's never clear cut as far as when it comes to the response for an officer at the scene of a domestic dispute. You have to get, of course, all the different portions of the story, and you have to have it all tidied up as best as you can. But again, one more time, I just want to give you the opportunity. This is now a complaint filed by Kessler against April Thompson. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So that's another piece that we now have as far as the history between Robert Kessler and those who lived in the home. Now, remember, the story goes, and I want to bring up the comment here from Elizabeth Rose James. I've been living under a rock for a few days. Can you do a recap of the story? Let's just go through the highlights, if chronologically, if we can.
Okay.
And you're better with the timeline than I am as far as dates, but I'm gonna.
You can fill in this all began this.
Stephanie Crone-Overholts comes down from Erie, Pennsylvania, and meets Robert Kessler. This is about a month ago now, right? About early November, or no?
The body parts were discovered November 11th, so it was presumably a few weeks before that, sometime in the fall.
Yep.
They had a chance meeting at a McDonald's here in the Hillsborough County area outside Tampa.
They talked about having an Erie connection.
She had the Pennsylvania license plate. She was originally from Erie, Pennsylvania, mother of three. And Mr. Kessler told Jeff Patterson he had worked in Erie some decades ago, and that's why they struck up a conversation. So you have this woman, Miss Stephanie Crone-Overholts, is staying with him at an address in Lutz. On November 11th, Tampa police respond to McKay Bay upon the discovery of a limb, a floating leg in the bay. That leg had a very distinctive tattoo with three names. It turned out to be Stephanie's three sons, Sean, Greg, and Zach, I believe, and that led to the identification of her as the victim. On that same day, we found out that her mother, back in Pennsylvania, reported her missing, had some concern she had not heard from her daughter in a few days. So the key date there, JB, November 11th. November 12th, they go back to the bay, they find another leg, other parts of the woman's body, and this really turns into a full-throttle homicide investigation. The gentleman on the stand there, yes, that is the Tampa police detective the gentleman right there was the one who signed off on the arrest warrant to take Mr. Kessler into custody. Last Wednesday night, JB, we're here Thanksgiving Eve. The interim police chief from Tampa announced the arrest of Mr. Kessler. He's been charged with second-degree murder with a weapon and abuse of a body in the death of Stephanie Crone-Overholts. And as of yesterday, the judge ruled that Mr. Kessler will remain without bond in jail until his trial. And we've been trying to piece everything together with the court documents, which show why police believe he's their suspect, and that is why he's now sitting in jail charged with a serious crime.
Amidst all of this, Robert Kessler agrees to an interview with 8 on Your Side's Jeff Patterson, denying any involvement. And we'll play back that clip for you now. Robert Kessler was approached by our colleague.
2 days before he's arrested.
2 days beforehand, approached by Jeff Patterson, one of our veteran reporters here at WFLA News Channel 8, cover many stories here in the Tampa Bay area. Jeff goes up. Robert Kessler agrees to do the interview, but doesn't want to show his face. Will speak, but doesn't want to show his face. Here is just basically the highlights of that interview.
He was from Erie, Pennsylvania, and I had worked for the city of Erie at one time 40 years ago. She didn't spend much time at the house. Like, she would be gone all night sometimes, but she always acted normal, and she was real good and meticulous about cleaning the house up for me. They got a search warrant, and they took my van, and they're not going to find, there's no evidence in there. There's evidence that she had been here probably or something like that, but that's it.
What do you think happened?
I don't know. She had a lot of different things where she had told me that some gang was after her.
Now, you have to take that with a grain of salt, because we're talking about somebody who 2 days later was arrested and charged in her murder. So But that is, you could hear the voice of the man that we're talking about, Robert Kessler, who again has been charged in Stephanie Crone-Overholts' murder. Let's get with this comment from Vicky and Gustav on YouTube. Hello, Vicky. Hello, Gustav. Hope you're having a good Thursday as we now are officially here in the final month of 2021. Hashtag HJB. How do they know it's a woman? What if it's a baby's DNA or a child? This is an interesting question, but they have enough information on the DNA that was run that it is a female. We're talking about now the second DNA profile, the reason that we're live here with you on the stream, the new developments, that a second DNA profile was found in the blood in the scene of the dismemberment at the home there in Lutz. And Vicky and Gustav wondering, okay, could it be a young female's DNA? Could it be a child's DNA? And the child one makes your skin crawl, because another commenter wondered if could the blood or could the DNA belong to the 8-year-old? We don't know. And could it possibly belong to April Thompson?
We don't know.
We don't know. We have no idea.
Unknown profile.
It's a completely unknown profile. The only detail that we have on it is that it is a female DNA profile. So I can't say, Vicky and Gustav, whether or not it was a child DNA or an infant's DNA, if it was a female child or an infant, or if it was a female child or a female infant. Paulina on YouTube, hashtag HeyJB, hashtag Justin, is the second DNA confirmed that it belonged to a victim, or it may be of somebody that helped him? It could also be contaminated from different place, maybe the home, perhaps. The prosecutor said that we potentially have a second victim because here, you know what? Why don't we play that clip one more time? Just so that everybody here can hear it, and just so that you can hear the words from the prosecutors, and you're not hearing it from us, you're hearing it directly from them. So we'll play it back one more time here. The prosecutor talking about this, and then after that, the public defender talking about it, and then we'll discuss it a bit further here on WFLA Now.
But I would suggest to the court that alone indicates a disregard for the safety of the community. Also, the fact that we have an unknown DNA profile in the same area where her body was dismembered. Now, we don't know for a fact whose DNA that is, but we know it's a female's and it's not his, the defendant's, and it's contained within an area of blood, and it's not the victim. I think, and I would suggest to the court, that alone shows a disregard for the safety of the community, that now we potentially have two victims.
And this argument about potentially another victim because there's an unknown female profile, that's just, Your Honor, that should not be given any weight.
I'm not going to consider that at all.
Thank you, Judge. I won't go any further into that then.
And again, the reason that the judge wasn't considering it was because, talking about a bond hearing in particular, it could reemerge. This second DNA profile could reemerge once the actual trial process gets underway. But this is, again, just for a bond hearing, talking about the charges at hand. And there are no charges right now connected to the second DNA profile, which is the reason why the judge said that wasn't really going to entertain that as far as this hearing that took place on Wednesday.
One thing the public defender brought up, a lot of her criticism of the state yesterday, JB, was the fact they only called one witness, and she said at one point it would have been nice to hear from the FDLE analyst, the forensic analyst who did this DNA.
Yeah.
And I imagine, you know, the way things played yesterday, it's kind of this mini trial setting where they had the one witness, but I mean, you're going to have a lot of witnesses at this trial, JB, between the witnesses who saw the man matching his description, police officers who were there, recovered the body parts, obviously the medical examiner, the FDLE analyst. So, I mean, once this does get to trial, JB, it is going to be a lot of witnesses. We presume the state will call at that point. Other thing I do want to bring up on the stream now, there were a lot of questions yesterday about, well, why was this even happening, this hearing about, you know, whether or not a man charged with second-degree murder should have bond. So just to help do a little clarification for our viewers, in cases like these, the state has the burden to prove to the judge that this guy needs to be kept locked up. And there's 4 factors that the state has to prove and the judge has to consider. The first was a dangerous, serious crime committed. Obviously, the allegation of homicide, that meets that burden there. The second one is there a substantial probability based on the evidence presented in court that this defendant is the indeed suspect in this case? And we've talked about the lengthy arrest warrant. The judge agreed there's substantial probability. Number 3, about the judge has to consider, would this person be a danger to the community? And you heard those very harsh words from her talking about the nature of this homicide, the dismemberment. She talked about his bravado in dumping the body parts. And then the fourth part is, could she impose reasonable bond conditions to let him out? And she basically said a GPS monitor would not keep the community safe. So I hope those four factors better explains to all of you as to why this hearing happened. The state laid out its motion to keep him detained. They proved all those 4 points in court. The judge sided with the state, and that's why Mr. Kessler is being held with no bond until his trial.
Yeah, and let's not forget a lengthy criminal history tied to cocaine and multiple multi-year stints behind bars. We're talking about somebody who has been through the system before. Talking about Robert Kessler. Getting to some more of the comments, but really let me just address Paulina from YouTube. Is the second DNA confirmed that it belonged to a victim, maybe somebody that assisted? So you heard the prosecutors there say that the DNA sample was contained within the blood found at the scene of the dismemberment. So is there any chance? Is there a chance that it doesn't belong to a victim? Also, we don't know how long that second DNA profile has been there. Let's reverse for a second, just for a moment. The blood could have been found because there were 3 blood samples that were processed
confirmed to be Stephanie's blood and DNA. Yep.
Right. 3 blood samples that were sent to FDLA for testing on the boots, on the cabinet, the kitchen cabinet, and on the mattress. So if we're talking about, let's just say for a second, for argument's sake, that we're talking about the mattress, could there have been blood from another female that was on that mattress from years prior? We don't know the origin date of that DNA sample. We don't know if this is something that was from the last several months. We don't know if that was something from a long time ago. And we also don't know how long Robert Kessler lived at that home in Lutz and whether or not that mattress is something that he has slept on for a long period of time. If it is in fact the mattress that we're talking about as far as where the second DNA profile was found contained within the blood at the scene of the dismemberment. So to answer Paulina's question, they said potentially a second victim, and that's all we have to go by. Winky Dinker, that's a name. Winky Dinker on YouTube. Hashtag HeyJB. Do we know if police plan on searching previous homes that Robert Kessler lived? An excellent question. And I don't know his residential history, Justin. I don't know if you in your reporting have found how long he lived at that home in Lutz.
I believe he'd been there for some time, and we do know that Tampa police executed a thorough search warrant on the property in Lutz, which both Jeff and myself visited. That is a good question. I believe other addresses might have shown up in the past, but this is the home that they've searched and found their evidence. But a good question there from our viewer.
Great question from Barb Olson on YouTube. Hashtag AJB. Why was Kessler interviewed by 8 on Your Side's Jeff Patterson to begin with? Again, before his, and just for those who just hopped on stream here, 2 days before his arrest, he denied any involvement in Stephanie Crone-Overholts' murder to our reporting colleague, Jeff Patterson.
So again, after they were able to identify from the tattoo who this victim was, they were able to do cross-record checks, and Stephanie Crone-Overholts had been at the Lutz address long enough that they said she had mail delivered there. And once they found the address there, made contact with Mr. Kessler. So again, Mr. Kessler was interviewed by police before he talked with Jeff, and then 2 days later he finds himself back in the Hillsborough County Jail.
And let me just say this. Kessler, it's confirmed. We know that Kessler and Crone-Overholts lived together. I've been out on the streets with a microphone in my hand. Justin does it every day. I know how difficult it is
to get people to talk,
especially connected to a murder, an ongoing homicide investigation. Yep. Usually when a reporter goes up to somebody and says, hey, we have questions about so-and-so who is the victim in a homicide investigation, more times than not, okay, they'll just say, I'm not talking on camera. Absolutely not. I have difficulty getting people to talk on camera when I'm talking about like a penny tax being introduced to a city. It's hard to get people to talk on camera. And Robert Kessler didn't speak on camera, but he did agree to an interview, the interview that we just played for you a few moments ago. And he didn't want to show his face, but he did want to speak and talk to Jeff and deny any involvement in Crone-Overholts' murder.
Yeah. And he didn't share his name either, but again, we knew who we were talking to. Again, I know whose home I went to that Saturday. Jeff went back on Monday, and I was surprised as you, JB, from having been in the neighborhood there, and neighbors were worried, concerned. So it is surprising that he did make those statements. And again, he denied any involvement, but police have pieced together this detailed investigation between the witness statements of what they observed over at the bridge at McKay Bay, phone records. There's also another part of the arrest warrant talks about seeing a man matching his description drop off Stephanie's car with the Pennsylvania tags 0.8 miles away from his home. So the police have laid out this detailed case, and much of the hearing yesterday was the homicide detective going piece by piece, all these witness statements, evidence, the phone records, the blood evidence, which led them to charge this man on your screen there with second-degree murder.
Let's get to the next comment that just came in. We're about to, this is the last call for your hashtag HeyJB, hashtag HeyJustin questions or comments about this story. Again, why do we do this? As journalists here, we just want to make sure that the most correct and accurate information is out there. And what we like to do here is address some of the questions and comments that come in about the stories that we cover here in the Tampa Bay area. Terry Watkins, I don't know how much time Terry's got, but Terry Watkins asking hashtag HeyJB, what was he in jail for before this? And again, we were live on stream that night, the night before Thanksgiving, and when I pulled up his long list of charges mostly related to cocaine use or drug use.
It should be noted, police took him into custody on a drug charge. He was in the jail on a drug charge last week before they arrested him for the additional charges. So even in this case, that's what police took him in for after the search of the home. So, but to your point, JB, he's been in prison before, at least 2 prison stints the prosecutor mentioned yesterday with regards to drug convictions and sentences.
Yeah, it's a pretty lengthy arrest record as far as arrest records go.
This is an older mugshot. We had the newer one showing how much older he looks now as he sits in jail now. That is the most recent mugshot from when he was booked last week in the Hillsborough County Jail after this latest arrest in this homicide investigation.
And not wanting to appear, waiving his right to appear.
Both. He was not in court for his first appearance. He was not in court yesterday for his pretrial detention hearing. So we have yet to see his face in court since he was arrested last week.
Why do you think that is? I'm just curious, because you're arrested in a gruesome murder. You've
denied involvement on
camera, denied involvement, and you have 2 opportunities to be in the courtroom to hear exactly how your defense is being assembled and how it's being executed, and you choose to remain in a jail cell rather in a courtroom. I don't understand. Well,
the public defender's office filed a motion objecting to pretrial detention. They put forward in writing, tried to argue that there could be bond conditions, GPS monitor. The judge obviously shot that all down, given the gruesomeness of this crime and the nature. But I mean, they're there representing him. It's just surprising he was not there either day in court, JB. And we'll see for his next hearing, if his face will be there or not.
As the saying goes, you have your right to your day in court, but he had that right, and he chose to just remain in his jail cell as they were talking about whether or not he deserved bond. And so perhaps he's saving his appearance for when a trial actually gets underway. Perhaps he just automatically assumed that he was going to be denied the opportunity for bond, but we don't know. But the man in the center of your screen had 2 opportunities to appear in court, and he chose to remain behind bars rather than appear in court before a judge. The last 2 we're going to get to. Melanie Gans, hashtag HeyJB, hashtag HeyJustin. Did the child live with the father?
So I'll be honest, I don't know who the little girl's father is.
We cannot definitively say that the little girl's father is Kessler, right?
We don't know. I do not have the answer to that question. We know, based on family ties, who the girl's mother is, that she had recently died of an overdose, but we do not know who the father is.
Sarah Gray, who is April Thompson's sister, said that they are now fighting for custody of the little girl who is in DCF care. So Florida DCF is in custody now of the 8-year-old girl, and they are fighting to have that 8-year-old girl delivered to her aunt, that being Aunt Sarah Gray, the sister of April Thompson, who died several months ago of what we understand is a drug overdose. But we'll find out more as all of this unfolds. Lastly, we'll leave here with this. Rachel Watson, #HeyJB, #HeyJustin. When will we learn whose DNA this second one belongs to? Here's what's interesting, and we can't say this for certain, but I want to mention, and I'd like to do this for our audience, I'd like to mention certain notes that I find interesting. The DNA profile was processed by FDLE. That's how we know that it was a female DNA profile. So they might have now this DNA sample that they have ran through their system to try to find out who the identity of this second person is. They don't have an identity of the second. All they know is that it is a female. But now Rachel's question is spot on. When are we going to find out? What will the process look like now to compare that DNA profile to other DNA profiles of people connected to Robert Kessler to find out whose DNA it is, this potential second victim we keep hearing about, or we heard about once, rather. I'm
just checking, JB. I didn't have a chance to check today the court record to see if there's any date for a next hearing. They did not mention one yesterday, but let me just do a quick search before we wrap up if there is any next court date to watch for. So I'm just going to check that.
And while Justin checks that out, it's just something that I'm very curious of, because now a process will be conducted as far as trying to determine where, whose DNA profile that is. The DNA profile that was found contained within blood at the scene of the dismemberment of Stephanie Crone-Overholts. So let's go through this again. Investigators run they run the blood on blood that was found at 3 different locations: on the boots, on the kitchen cabinet, and on the mattress where the dismemberment is said to have occurred. Those 3 places, they took blood, they sent it to FDLE for testing. FDLE says, hey, we now know that there is a second DNA profile here, and that second DNA profile is female, but we don't have a match for it. We don't know that. Here's the thing, it would have been, if they had a match, you would immediately assume that they would have announced a match, whether or not it was a match in relation to somebody that is connected to Robert Kessler, the man in the center of your screen, but we just don't know. Hopefully we're going to find out this as time continues to go on and we get closer to trial, or maybe we find out during the trial itself. And that, of course, leads us back to Justin, if there's any additional court date.
The next hearing has not been announced. The most recent filing from yesterday was the evidence data sheet, which we did not really see any displays, JB, of the photos, but you could see the prosecutor showing the detective, I think it must have been 20 to 30 evidence photos, from the location of the body parts to the search of the home to other photographs that we will presumably see once this gets to trial. But as of yesterday, still no date set for Robert Kessler's next court date, but everyone here at WFLA News Channel 8 will stay on top of this. We'll work with JB to get any new information we obtain. We did also submit a request for the autopsy for April Thompson, again, to confirm what people have told us about the overdose. So we're hoping to get that document as well, JB. I'll let you know if our assignment desk comes through with that document, maybe answer some more questions. But again, the other thing we mentioned earlier when I made the correction is that Mr. Kessler had filed a protective order against the little girl's mother back over the summer, and just adds to this puzzle, this mystery of everything that's happened in the last few months with this man who now sits in jail charged with that woman's murder, Stephanie Overholts.
Let's one more time before we wrap up here. There was a commenter on YouTube who was just asking, Lizzie, hello to Lizzie, saying, where's the little girl that was with him? So let's just kind of go through the people involved in this terrible story. You're looking here at Stephanie Crone-Overholts, who, upon leaving from Erie, Pennsylvania, coming down to the Tampa Bay area, was murdered, gruesomely dismembered, and she is deceased. This is the person who has been arrested and charged in her murder and dismemberment, that being Robert Kessler of Lutz, Florida, who, again, did not want to appear in court, will not be appearing on the streets anytime soon because he was denied bond. The next time we see him very well likely will be in court. So that's where we are with Robert Kessler. And then lastly, the other picture that we have to show you as well here is that of April Thompson, who neighbors telling Justin that
died of an overdose a few months before.
Is also deceased, died of an overdose. And then the final question, where is, and this is to Lizzie's question, where is the 8-year-old girl? The 8-year-old girl is right now in the custody of Florida DCF. That's the Florida Department of Children and Families. And April's sister, Sarah Gray, who spoke to Jeff Patterson, our colleague, says that she is now fighting for custody of the 8-year-old girl who is currently in DCF care, fighting for her custody. And if we hear any details about whether or not Sarah Gray does get custody of the 8-year-old girl, we'll, of course, pass that along to you on our various social media accounts. You can follow Justin at WFLA Justin on his various social media accounts.
Just one more thing, the little girl, to viewers joining us now. I mean, this girl is become a key witness in this case.
Yeah.
And you can read the court documents over on WFLA.com, which talks about how what she told police didn't match what Kessler had said about the last time to have had contact with Stephanie Overholts. We know from the testimony yesterday, what's in the arrest report, that it's I believe it's November 5th. Is that the Thursday or Friday? November 5th at 9:32 is the last time there's any outgoing texts or calls from Stephanie Crone-Overholts' phone. We know the body parts started to be discovered the next week on the 11th. So that night, statements that Kessler made did not match up with what the little girl had said, and that is all laid out in the arrest report and the state's motion to keep him locked up. As you again take a look at this little girl's mother, who died earlier this year from an overdose.
But now the question really is, we were expecting, of course, to find out more in the trial, and that was the next real the next event in this story as far as where this goes from here. But now we have this big lingering question: who is the second female? Who is the second woman? This DNA profile that was found within the blood at the scene of the dismemberment. Who is this person? This female DNA profile. If we find out more information, we're going to continue to press these questions, ask these questions, and press for answers. We'll, of course, let you know on WFLA.com, the WFLA app. That's where we have the latest on our reporting. We have a lot of court documents and the highlights of those court documents for you, a breakdown and an analysis on the court documents, everything that we know about the murder of Stephanie Crone-Overholts, the arrest of Robert Kessler, the others that we have talked about in this case, and as far as their involvement and their connection, it's all for you on WFLA.com, the WFLA app. If you're joining us on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, you can click on the link in the description on this video. It'll take you over to more, and we have an entire set of articles there where you can read the latest on this story. And updates on this story will be made available, yes, on WFLA.com, the WFLA app, as well as on the WFLA Justin social media accounts and the WFLA JB social media accounts. I'd like to thank Justin, our entire audience, everyone who used hashtag HeyJustin, hashtag HeyJB to file in their question or their comment in the Facebook Live or YouTube Live section, comment sections. The very latest that we have here for you on the story and more on WFLA.com and the WFLA app.